This video will be speaking about the battle between Gojo and Sukuna in Jujutsu Kaisen. This battle taking place in between chapters 223 to 236, so it's very late in the story. If you want to avoid spoilers, click off this video. The destiny of humanity on his back alone, the strongest of the present versus the strongest in history, the son of God versus the demon god, the genius versus the fallen. These two sorcerers have suffered solitude from their strength, and to them, the only thing unobtainable was one equal to them. As of the making of this video, it's been about a year and some change since Gojo and Sukuna's long-awaited battle would begin. This battle had been built up since the very beginning of the series in chapter 3. With Sukuna's declaration of Gojo being the first person whose life he will claim when he reobtains his full strength, and Gojo going on a few moments later to assure Yuji that Sukuna, like the rest of his many challengers, would be no problem to him. It wouldn't be until chapter 221, 218 chapters after these two characters had this conversation, that they would finally get to clash and set up their death match in order to determine who is truly the strongest. In this video, I'll be speaking about this deathmatch in particular and many topics that surround it from a perspective that comes after a decent amount of time has passed. Build up, strategy, analysis of the two characters, fan reception and more. This fight as a whole means so much to me, but I'll save all the love I have for it for the end of the video. With that said, since I value the time of both you and I, let's get into the video. Before we get into the fight itself, I think speaking about how it was built up throughout the story, community, and even promotional material for those who read the story through physical copies is important. From my perspective, the build up to this fight plays a huge role into what makes it so amazing. And when you pick at the story enough, you notice that this fight was built up for almost the entire story. Gojo and Sukuna being so sure that one would triumph over the other at their full strength from the beginning of the story laid out the foundation of this conflict. But as the story continued, we would see both Gojo and Sukuna decimate everybody and everything that stood in their way with relative ease. Whenever the strength of a sorcerer would be spoken of, these two would always find their way into the conversation each time. Even Kenjaku, the sorcerer of sorcerers, who has broken the rules many times over, made it clear that when it comes to these two guys, he wants no parts of it. These sorcerers were both referred to as the Honored One, and at the point of their battle, it was quite clear that these two sat on their own level compared to the rest of the cast. But even with their obvious strength gap, there's much more to the build-up behind this fight. When we really take a look at these two characters, the roles they play, and their core moments in the series, you come to see that this was the only direction that both of their stories would go. Their conflict, for better or worse, was inevitable. To look at Gojo first, solitude is the state of being that has always defined his entire life, but for a brief period, it didn't. In the past, Gojo had a close friend named Suguru Geto, an equal to him in strength, and arguably someone even more special than he was, as he was able to rival a child of fate despite not being from a special clan, no special backgrounds, nothing like that. With Geto present in his life, Gojo was able to experience the feeling of having a partner, someone who he can actually relate to and call an equal. As the two would always say, we are the strongest. Gojo having this experience allowed him to truly understand what it's like to have someone equal to him in this world. His solitude was finally gone. Gojo finally had someone who understood his position and strength, and at the end of the premature death arc, this person was permanently gone. His solitude would set in once more. Gojo losing this person is how his purpose of nurturing the students to become a group of people that can walk alongside one another was formed, as he claims that he will never allow anyone to be left alone again. To me, it's no secret that Gojo's solitude as the strongest is something that endlessly pained him. So when Sukuna, this being that should simply no longer exist, arrives in modern time, Gojo more than likely saw this as a miracle. Another equal has manifested, someone with the potential to give him that feeling that he'd never feel again. A chance to be understood by someone else once more has finally come. This would be a good time to segue into the role of Sukuna in the story. Sukuna in this series has always represented sort of a writing concept that I like to refer to as the end. When it comes to Sukuna, most major characters who face him always end up dying and entering into a state of reflection. He serves as an end to many people's journeys in every way possible. As many challengers in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen have faced Sukuna in order to test their own strength, seek the answer behind the purpose of their strength, or to atone for previous actions, Sukuna seems to serve as sort of a gatekeeper or guide to a person's self-reflection and actualization, and Sukuna himself completely understands and accepts this, unlike Gojo. As Sukuna himself says, "I'm sure many warriors have given heart and soul challenging you. They weren't doing so to curse you. They simply wanted to be recognized, to validate who they thought themselves to be. You met their eyes in response and slaughtered them." You asked earlier, how could I possibly connect with and love those beneath me? Well, if that isn't love, I don't know what is. We are loved because we are strong, and we simply respond to that love in kind. Sukuna, as he is challenged by those throughout the series, does choose to validate these challengers, namely Jogo, who he tells to stand proud before sending him into the reincarnation cycle. Gojo is just another sorcerer in the line of many sorcerers who face Sukuna. As like with all others, he also enters the state of self-reflection after his battle with Sukuna. But obviously, Gojo's a little more important to Sukuna than everybody else. Interestingly enough, when he had that talk with Jogo, Sukuna would actually recognize Gojo as someone with an immense level of strength, telling Jogo that self-actualization is what will allow him to be a curse that can reach the heights of Gojo. This battle was always more than just two super strong dudes duking it out, and I wanted to make that clear. There's also just the fact that Gojo very clearly represented a Buddha-like figure throughout the story, whereas Sukuna represented the devil, Yama, anything underworld related basically. It was a matchup made in heaven. The story did a great job at building the battle up, but I also think the couple of years of community speculation on this matchup played a huge role in expectations behind this fight. On YouTube and other social media platforms, there would be someone like every 3 days asking who'd win in a fight, and this would lead into endless discussion on how Sukuna could possibly get past the infinity, what his curse technique truly is, and how he's going to reveal it against Gojo, and more. There were also endless videos about how this fight would go, despite nobody really having any idea of Sukuna or Gojo's full capabilities. And with the release of chapter 221, where these two sorcerers set their battle in place, many more of these videos would pop up. Even I made one. This is where I really started taking YouTube seriously. Power scaling aside, most people place their bets on either sorcerer because of the narrative itself. People thought that Gojo being brought back just for him to lose is stupid, so he'd barely win and lose his abilities doing so. Whereas others would say that Sukuna is going to be the final villain and has a lot of beef with Yuji, so it wouldn't make sense for Yuji to never get his payback on Sukuna. Both reasonings were pretty valid, and this would create even more tension behind the fight. Last, although some of these promotions came out after the fight was completely done due to being on the schedule of physical volume releases, there are videos officially created by Shonen Jump that you can find just hyping up and promoting this battle. And on top of all this, the fact that Jujutsu Kaisen went on a 1-month break after this fight would be set up, man, the hype was just immeasurable. And did it live up to those expectations? In my opinion, absolutely. As Gojo declares that he'd take home the victory, we get a chapter of preparation that clarifies that Sukuna will be at 20 fingers worth of power, and that Gojo will be headed into the fight solo. And now, the stage is set. This battle begins in the most exciting way possible. Gojo preparing a ritual unbeknownst to Sukuna in order to begin the battle by firing a surprise 200% hollow purple. And Gege takes this time to introduce the readers to more of the Jujutsu power system. Rituals, chants, dances, etc. These could all be used to increase or supplement the power of a sorcerer's abilities. And why does Gege decide to introduce these concepts alongside a 200% hollow purple 200 plus chapters into the story? I believe that this is to let the readers know that this battle is going to be completely on its own level. We have seen chants and rituals throughout the story, but Gege lays these out in front of us to let us know that these are going to be active parts of the battle. Gege doing this lets us know from the jump that Gojo and Sukuna are such high-level unparalleled sorcerers that we're going to be seeing levels of Jujutsu unseen in this series until now. These two have never really needed to use more than a pinky to put down top-tier sorcerers, but against one another, they're going to need every advantage they can get. They have finally found an equal, and now they'll fight with everything they know and have to put the other down. Another part of the 200% Hollow Purple that I like was that it was recently confirmed to be used to emphasize the fact that this is a battle between sorcerers, not warriors. Cheap shot surprise attacks are all a part of the game, and if that move eviscerated Sukuna and ended the battle there, Gojo would be deemed as a superior sorcerer. It's that simple. All of these thoughts come from 5 to 6 pages of the fight, a testament to how great it was. As the battle actually begins, Gojo and Sukuna exchange words. Sukuna says something relatively important here. He says something along the lines of calling Gojo one of many fish that's been atop his cutting board, a bit fresher than most, but one he will still cut up nonetheless. And for him, he wants to start by peeling his scales. Take note of this for later. We see Sukuna already have an answer to Gojo's infinity barrier that's allowed him to be untouchable by any other sorcerer in the modern day, domain amplification. And due to Sukuna's immense power, Gojo cannot simply overwhelm Sukuna's domain amplification like he could with anybody else in the series. Sukuna from the jump poses a legitimate threat to the strongest sorcerer. In the chapter after this, the two use their domains to settle the battle as quick as possible. This clash displaying the most beautiful art in the series, capturing the gravitas of these two insurmountable domain expansions, and it results in Gojo, for the first time ever, as the strongest sorcerer, actually being hit. When people saw the final page of chapter 225, the entire community exploded, and it would continue to explode for every chapter after that as well. But 225 legitimately had some people worried that the fight ended that fast, and thankfully, we couldn't be more wrong. After being cut in the neck, a cut that would sever anybody else's head, Gojo again displays that this is a battle between gods of Jujutsu, instantly healing the damage and going on to eat a barrage of dismantling cleaves while laughing and thinking about how his curse technique is far superior to Sukuna's. He then goes on to withstand Sukuna's entire domain expansion and shoot him with a red point blank in the face, taking the chapter home. I mean, I really look back at these chapters and the experience, and I have to say, you just had to be there. It was truly a once in a lifetime event, and this is only about 20% of the fight. The two sorcerers clashed their domains multiple times, exhausting one another with their own individual methods of draining each other's ability to use domain expansion, and the fight leads into round 2. This round centering around hand-to-hand combat and Jujutsu. Although there are so many more amazing moments I could go over in round 1, I want to keep this video as more of a look back than a fight summary. But again, I do suggest you guys to reread it if you get the chance. I also have to say that I enjoy how round 1 handled going into round 2. Gege really wrote Sukuna and Gojo exhausting their domains in a satisfying way that will make the readers not question why they're no longer using their domains. For Sukuna, is utilizing the 10 Shadows technique in order to have Mahoraga adapt to Gojo's unlimited void, and forcing Gojo to forcefully recover his domain expansion by healing his brain, which led into him damaging his brain. Whereas for Gojo, he managed to overload Sukuna's brain with so much information by using the unlimited void that Sukuna's brain got fried. This sounds kind of dumb to say, but what I'm getting at here is, when I talk about readers not questioning their domains, it means that when it comes to Gojo and Sukuna, they can use their domain expansions as many times as they want in a day. So this leads into the sorcerers always having their domains as an option against any opponent in the series. When it comes to other sorcerers in the fights that they have, they tend to not really use domains or save their domain expansion as a last resort because it exhausts them so much. But for Gojo and Sukuna, you look at them and normally ask, why not use domain expansions until the fight's over? So this would cause a problem in Gege writing their fight, because let's be real, we'd all prefer a fight like round 2 over a fight like round 1. But round 1 has to happen, so the fight doesn't have that big question about their domain expansions being unused. So Gege handled their domain expansions having unlimited uses by having both of the sorcerers focus on restricting the other's ability to use their domain expansion. For a power system as complicated yet lenient as Jujutsu, I've always found how Gege handled this glaring issue to be quite impressive. And he managed to make the domain expansion battle almost as impressive as round 2 was. So we all won. Talking about round 2, specifically chapters 231 to 236, where the two combatants focus on Jujutsu and hand-to-hand combat, It opens up with the sorcerers just getting straight back into action, with a lot of emphasis on the fight being a race against time. Either Gojo can finish off Sukuna before Sukuna utilizes the 10 shadows to completely adapt to Gojo's techniques and render them all null, or Sukuna manages to withstand Gojo's onslaught. I think a part of this fight that isn't acknowledged enough is how passive Sukuna plays, as if he's meticulously working towards solving a puzzle throughout the entire fight, whereas Gojo is charging ahead endlessly, using his immense genius to find ways to wear down and trick Sukuna multiple times. But as the fight reaches its climax, these roles actually become reversed. Gojo deciding to enact a 3-chapter plan to finish off Sukuna with a 1 million IQ play that even utilizes Sukuna's own adaptation that he worked on throughout the entire fight against him in order to land a direct unlimited hollow purple, whereas Sukuna is forced to attempt to stop this play and figure out how he's going to survive on the spot, and at the very end, he uses the information that Mahoraga left behind in order to finally activate it. The world-cutting slash, allowing him to take home the victory. This round also displays many new ways that we see the two sorcerers utilize their techniques. Although Sukuna employs the wait and see strategy we've always seen him use, Gojo is extremely relentless in the fight. Of course, this being due to the support of his defensive barrier. We also get to see Gojo use his techniques as more of a utility sort of way, rather than just brute forcing like we've always seen him do, which I really like. It shows that the Infinity is more than just hacks to win, but can really allow you to control an entire battlefield and endlessly trick your opponents if you have the intelligence to use it in such a way. Sukuna, on the other hand, shows us the true capabilities of the 10 shadows. He uses shadow manipulation to try and sneak Gojo whenever he can. He sandbags Gojo's attacks for Mahoraga by partially manifesting the Dharma Chakra on his head, because as we've seen, Mahoraga cannot withstand Gojo's attacks at any level above 20% of his strength, which again reinforces how much of a gap these sorcerers have over the entire cast, because Mahoraga's no pushover. Sukuna also merging the Shikigami within his technique to create Agito as another problem for Gojo was another level of strategic pressure on him, as Agito, who's near unkillable, could heal either Sukuna or Mahoraga if given the chance, and put Gojo in a very bad situation. So this made Gojo have to focus on Agito before getting to Mahoraga, who's also adapting to his techniques and stuff. Gojo really had to juggle multiple issues in this fight because of Sukuna's high level thinking and the overpowered ability that is the 10 shadows. Sukuna also finding many ways to get around Gojo's barrier was pretty nice to see as well. I also have to mention that the fight choreography was also great, especially chapter 233. The way the two sorcerers constantly go back and forth, tricking one another as they unleash multiple techniques and run through the building in this super fast-paced battle was a spectacle. You really feel the power struggle between the two sorcerers not only in this chapter, but throughout the entire fight. One last thing I truly enjoy about round 2 is how much it serves as a love letter to both fighters. As Gojo pulls off his final ultimate play, which is the unlimited hollow purple, Sukuna walks out of the carnage and destruction heavily damaged, and generates the world-cutting slash, eliminating Gojo. Before we see Gojo off though, we get to see that he was critically injured before he even realized it, going on to pour out his heart in one final goodbye, expressing how he can empathize with the sheer magnitude of Sukuna's solitude, and how he loves everyone around him and doesn't feel lonely, but despite this, there was a line he drew not as a human, but as a living creature. He goes on to speak about how he finally had the chance to give it his all thanks to Sukuna, but he wasn't able to do the same for him. As Gojo says this, he pictures Sukuna with his back turned toward him. Despite this, he says it was fun, and expresses gratitude that this is how he went out, a warrior's death. He yells at his teacher one last time, asking what happened to a sorcerer dying without any regrets as he fades from existence, praying that this is truly his end. Soon after this though, we'd see that Sukuna, in contrast to how Gojo saw his back turned toward him earlier in the chapter, would actually be facing him with his body wide open, expressing acceptance rather than the disappointment that Gojo believed he left him, and he sends Gojo off saying that he has cleared his skies, making Gojo smile one last time. Understanding that he actually did allow Sukuna to share the same feeling that he did in the battle. It's absolutely great and the perfect send-off for Gojo as a character. He died happy, achieving everything he wanted with flying colors, including the fact that his students would go on to defeat Sukuna and live happy lives together at the end of it all. Gojo and Sukuna, for once in their lives, did not feel alone. There are also other things, such as Gojo getting the same feeling he did from fighting Toji, Kashimo refusing to allow anybody to interrupt their fight because he understands Gojo's solitude better than anyone else and knows what the fight truly means to him. Sukuna displaying his overwhelming dominance in terms of Jujutsu prowess, being able to manipulate Jujutsu to a level that allows him to defy the concepts and the rules of the world itself. In this same defiance, being required to cut down the child of fate himself, sought through Gojo. The battle was perfectly executed from my perspective. Now, many people do not agree with the ending of the battle being a positive thing. I mean, most people hated it when it first came out. But of course, manga is something that tends to age better over time and is negatively received day one almost 24/7. So I'll be honest, I never take day one opinions seriously. A reasonable complaint about the ending of the fight was obviously how the World Cutting Slash was played out. 235 ending with Gojo being declared as the victor, and the next time we see him, he's cut in half. I certainly get it. Over time, I've come to rationalize this as Gege displaying the level of technique required to put down Gojo as a combatant. The World Cutting Slash defies the concept of space, so it would simply appear and hit its opponent. As we can see with Kashimo, the slash simply appeared under him with nothing indicating its travel, and would have cut him if Sukuna did not tell him to dodge. A year later, I've come to accept this technique as an ability that was written to be divine, sit above the rest, and scientifically, I don't think seeing the technique travel is even possible. Setting aside the World Cutting Slash, those who bet on Sukuna winning were pretty happy because they got clowned on for a week straight after chapter 235, and Gojo fans were pretty sad, and I think that's an understatement. I think I even remember seeing murals of Gojo being drawn all over the entire world, people placing candles down for the guy. I mean, seriously, Gojo's death really shook up the internet. It was crazy. Don't even get me started on all those fangirl Gojo incidents that I can't really mention in fear of my channel being terminated. I myself was pretty satisfied with the fight. I mean, 13 chapters of an unparalleled Jujutsu being displayed in a one-on-one was going to satisfy me no matter how it played out. I mean, the fact that this 1v1 was 13 chapters straight says a lot about it. The only fights in the series that reach the length of this are ones that require multiple fighters swapping in and out. I don't think there's a single one-on-one in the series that's even reached half the length of this fight. Again, only reinforcing the strength and prowess that these two possess. So I was pretty satisfied at the time of its completion. Even after the fight, the effects of the battle are present for the rest of the series. Had Gojo not been present, our heroes would have absolutely no chance of defeating Sukuna ever, and Kenjaku makes that clear before the battle would even begin. Gojo managed to weaken Sukuna enough to allow everyone else to take it home and end his reign of terror. Something I don't think is brought up enough is the fact that Sukuna remained unparalleled and undefeated for hundreds of years after he'd sealed himself. Nobody came close to his power. I get that Gojo lost, but understand that he did something that no other sorcerer in history could, which was to open up a path to allow Sukuna to actually taste defeat, so his efforts were not wasted due to his defeat. Not only this, but Gojo, a sorcerer who lived for more than himself, who lived to change the world with his actions and put the people he loved before himself, got to die in a way that satisfied him the most. He got to die the way he wanted, being the only sorcerer in history to die with no regrets, whereas Sukuna, in all of his selfishness, would die in the most pathetic way possible, being looked down upon by the person he despises most, and not only this, being pitied by him. Sukuna didn't even get to die a warrior's death either, and apparently never got the same luxury that Gojo had of completely cutting loose before dying with a super powerful opponent. Gojo died achieving everything he set out to do with flying colors, whereas Sukuna lived accomplishing nothing and died doing the same, being put down like a dog by the very person he stated should live in complete misery due to being so pathetic and weak. All in all, Sukuna was truly a pointless existence that has a chance of being completely forgotten. It's poetic. Another after effect of this battle in Jujutsu Kaisen is more meta, but it's the fact that it has a lot of reread potential. It wasn't until I reread the fight for the second time that I noticed what Sukuna was actually saying when he stated that he was going to peel Gojo's scales. Now in hindsight, I see that it was a metaphor for him finding a way to cut through Gojo's infinity by the end of their fight. To truly conclude and reflect on this fight a year later after speaking about how much I loved it for the entire video, I think it aged beautifully. It has every part of the Jujutsu system we knew of at the time, and even goes further beyond that at certain points. And when you examine the fight, a lot of questions that we had about certain parts of the system interacting with one another, such as an open domain and a regular domain clashing, could have been put together before we'd actually see the domain clash. I like little things like that because it displays consistency. The fight choreography remains the best in the series, as it shows tons of cool abilities, strategies, and hand-to-hand combat. Meanwhile, opening and closing the battle with both sorcerers, reminding the audience through their actions that again, before anything else, and at the end of it all, they are both sorcerers. Trickery comes before anything else. Like with almost every battle in the series, it concludes with the winner using surprise to their advantage. I also have to say that the conclusion of this fight is one of the most beautiful out there, simultaneously serving to wrap up every part of Gojo's character perfectly, as Sukuna praises him and explains how he defied the laws of the world to simply put down Gojo. This final scene really reminds me that Gege has this sense of style and direction rarely seen. He just knows how to place his characters, settings, and dialogue in a way that can sometimes really make you take everything in and appreciate it. Sukuna's speech in 236 will always feel as some divine being who decided the battle by using an ability beyond my comprehension, and as Sukuna stands shirtless and ravaged in front of Gojo's brutalized body after using this technique that we cannot even lay our eyes on, I have to say that this feeling is pretty accurate. To this day, I would say that this fight is possibly the best in the series, with it only being comparable to the fight that comes after it. It does everything that Jujutsu Kaisen can do right in my opinion, and I do believe that as time goes on, it will be appreciated more. It's a fight that was absolutely pivotal in skyrocketing Jujutsu Kaisen's popularity to unprecedented heights, and one that will be remembered forever. The character writing, the fight itself, the build-up, I can go on and on. Gege has prepared this fight for over 200 chapters of this series, and we can really see the payoff here. With that said, I believe this fight was absolutely special. I made this channel with the intention of covering it and bringing it to life through my movie on the channel, so coming back to it and just going over it again after a year, it hits different. As always guys, I have to say thank you so much for all the love and support on this journey, and I hope to see you guys next time. Peace out.